one of the most iconic, the third largest in the world, with 20 brands, 7,000 properties, and presence in 123 countries. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hand over to Mandeep and Christopher Nassetta.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have the privilege to be with one of the world's most admired and respected hospitality leaders, someone who manages a portfolio of over 7,000 hotels in 123 countries and counting. Ladies and gentlemen, I am with Christopher J. Nassetta, President and CEO of Hilton Worldwide. Chris, thank you so much for meeting me today and for setting up this chat for the benefit of our audience who will be participating in our forthcoming Hospitality Summit, Hope 2023, which is scheduled a few days from now.
Mandeep, thank you for having me. You can see we're in this wonderful beach location, but not really. I'm sure people have figured out that this is a bit of a ruse with a green screen, but it's really nice to be here. I'm sorry that I can't be live in Goa. Goa is one of my favorite places on earth. I will be in Goa later in the year, but sadly, when you asked me to do this, I had a conflict on my schedule. So to the whole crowd, it's wonderful to be with you virtually. I apologize I'm not there physically. I am very much somebody that loves people and is in the travel industry. I'm very into face-to-face interactions and getting off of Zoom and getting off the virtual thing. So this is a little bit of an out-of-body experience, but I'm glad that I could airlift in and participate this way. And next time, if you want me back, if you ever have me back, I'll make sure I'm there in person.
We are absolutely going to take you up on that, Chris. We would love to have you on subsequent editions of Hope. And I do understand that you couldn't make it this time, but we did what was next best to still have you there, even if you're not there physically. So going forward, we're going to talk the next about 25 to 30 minutes, Chris, on emerging trends in the future of hospitality from your perspective. And as a starting point, I'd love to know, how are you looking at the next 12 to 24 months, given that there has been a bounce back for travel almost in every part of the world, but it's peppered with the news of recessionary trends in almost all significant major markets, including the US and Europe, and also the sort of, not enough clarity on what's happening in China.
Yeah, I am an optimist by nature. I think those that know me know that, which has kept me going and kept me sane during the last 3 years, and a lot of other crises that we've had in my 40 years of being in this industry. But I think there are good reasons to be optimistic. The world's a big place, so it's moving at a little bit different speed in different places around the world. But broadly, we feel very good about the makeup of the business for 2023. And that belief is supported by what we see going on, in different regions of the world, which I'll talk about, but, in the basic fundamentals of the major segments of our business. So if you look at the major segments of the business, we still see very strong leisure demand throughout the world. People have generally the wherewithal and certainly have the desire, given what has happened in their lives over the last few years, to want to travel for leisure. And so we continue to see not just good growth, but really pent-up demand being released still in that segment. In the business transient segment, we continue to see very strong demand growth, particularly in small and medium-sized enterprises, more so than in the larger corporates, although those are growing as well overall. We've seen very strong growth in SMEs. I think that's one, people are getting back to business around the world, and two, there is a considerable amount of pent-up demand being released there that has not really been released. And then in the meetings and events business, look around the room. Hopefully there are going to be hundreds and hundreds of people there with you live. I just attended, a conference, Alice in Los Angeles last week, 3,000 people. the demand for meetings and events is off the charts because so many things people realized needed to happen that didn't happen. And there's not only a considerable amount of pent-up demand that's being released, there's just new demand because people realize as much as doing things virtually was convenient and efficient, that humans need humans, and that the opportunity to network and build relationships, build culture, innovation, collaboration, all those things require meetings and events and face-to-face interaction. And so we have all of those tailwinds. Regionally, we have some tailwinds in the sense that some parts of the world were slow to get through COVID, particularly parts of Asia that lagged, Japan and China, as two very large markets. And they are now, Japan is reasonably fully open and China is on a path to opening. The other phenomena that's going on that is, that's a benefit in terms of tailwind is major cities around the world, which have been slower to recover because of the issues related to COVID, are now, most of them, either fully recovered or in a very strong recovery mode, which gives us another tailwind. And if that's not enough, sort of following on the major cities, international travel, the world is opening up, and there is massive pent-up demand for people, for leisure, business, meetings and events, to cross borders and do the things that they've needed to do that they've been accumulating for a few years. So those are all really strong tailwinds that are definitely met with some headwinds, and the headwinds are obvious. The headwinds are that we have macro conditions, not everywhere, but in many parts of the world, that are slowing as a result of central banks around the world trying to get control of inflation. I think they're doing the right thing. I think they're serious about the task at hand. And as a result, you will see macro conditions slow. We have all been listening to the pundits talk about soft landing, bumpy crash. I'm not smart enough to know where that ends up. If I were to bet, I would say it'll be a soft to a bumpy landing. I think right now, it doesn't feel like we're going to have a crash landing. And so when I net all of that out, okay, the tailwinds of all the things I already covered against that headwind, I think net that, we are in a pretty good position as we think about the year ahead. I think the tailwinds are stronger than those headwinds in our industry. And the reality is there are a lot of other industries. If you watch business news and read business periodicals where you could feel bad, but the reality is most of the industries that are getting painted with a negative brush were huge beneficiaries in COVID that thought their new world order was going to sort of be that everybody was going to stay home and shop and buy and do everything virtually. So it was retailers and technology and banking and some of those industries that that just had this huge lift during COVID, and it's not that they're bad industries by any means. They're just normalizing, and we didn't obviously benefit from COVID. We were severely impaired by COVID, and we're still in recovery mode. So I think the world wants to be painted with a really negative brush. The reality is, I think you don't have to believe much to feel pretty good about our business. I think last comment I'd make is that's the short term. The long term feels awfully good too.
Just moving on, during the peak of COVID, Chris, there was a lot of predictions which were made by many people on everything's going to change, how customer behavior is going to change, how hotel service designs are going to change. Even hotel designs are likely to change in the future to accommodate this new sort of thing that we are faced with during COVID, and the fact that it could recur again. How much of that do you think, Chris, is actually going to take place? Are we seriously going to see a change in hotel design to some extent, and also to the service design inside hotels, which is going to be more long-term than short-term?
I think the answer is yes. Okay, but I would also say, not unlike my prior commentary, most of these trends were in motion pre-COVID. What happened in COVID is it accelerated many of them, and it accentuated many of them, where it just made the need more dramatic than it might have been pre-COVID. So think about, listen, there'll be a lot of differences in a hotel of the future, but I think the ones that will be striking will be technology. Okay, we were already at Hilton, we had digital key, digital check-in, digital room selection, connected in every hotel in the world pretty much. Connected rooms, so you can run, the audio and visual and temperature, all that. We were doing a lot of things to digitize pieces of the experience, to make it an even better experience by taking friction out and adding more delight and freeing up team members to do the more curated pieces of the service delivery puzzle for customers that machines can't do. That was already happening. It's just accelerated. We're very happy we were way ahead of the curve on most of that stuff from an industry point of view. But I think the hotel of the future, your ability to interact with the hotel in every way from the palm of your hand is going to be extraordinary as you move forward 3, 5, and 10 years. It's not going to be clear, take the human element out of it. We are a business of people serving people. We always have been, and we always will be. What those people will do will change. It will allow the people to focus, as I said, less on the mechanical and more on the curated things that really deliver alpha for a customer and their experience. So I think technology will clearly be one of the big changes you'll see. But there'll be things and that will affect service delivery. What do the people focus their time on if we can have technology take a lot of friction out of the process? The other thing is some of the physical elements of properties and service elements will change. Food and beverage. Food was going to good food fast, not fast food, okay, in most parts of the world. Not everywhere. I think in India for sure, and most of Asia Pacific for that matter, I think it was a little bit more of a traditional approach to food and beverage, but most of the rest of the world, again, good food fast, not fast food, and a trend towards more healthy.
Correct.
Those trends have accelerated. People still want things quickly, but they want them done well, and they want them to be more healthy. And so I think you'll see some meaningful trends. It'll be different in every part of the world to reflect the desires of the customer base in that part of the world. But I think you will continue to see all of us really focused on food and beverage that way. Health and wellness. People cared about it before, they care about it more now. They were afraid for their lives, during COVID. And so now many people have built new rituals in there. That's why we put, and it will be coming to a town near you, but we started in the U.S. We put a Peloton bike we did a deal with Peloton to put a Peloton bike in every hotel in the U.S., and we'll eventually do it in every hotel in the world when we can build out the infrastructure. Why? Because our customers want it. There are a bunch of people that are very loyal Peloton users that will stay with us if they can get their Peloton bike. But there's going to be a bunch of other elements in health and wellness connected to food and beverage, connected to the sleep experience, connected to the gym and spa, and all of those relevant experiences. Meetings and events, the way they're done is a little bit different. Now, we went fully virtual during COVID. Now you've sort of gone back to largely physical in most parts of the world, but there's a hybrid element. We were doing that before. It's a bigger piece of the equation now. And so the technology and the needs of being able to, build out infrastructure to be able to do, quality hybrid events is important. As I said, with more mobility, people not in office much, how we do meeting space to now serve as almost like people's surrogate for a corporate office, for corporate meeting space, changes some of the perspective on how you design flexible meeting spaces. And I could go on and on. I think those are some of the bigger things that I think you're going to see changing. And they take time. The physical elements in systems like ours with over 7,000 hotels, you're not going to go out and change all that overnight. But as new hotels are delivered And as we're doing normal reinvestment in hotels, I think in those areas, you're going to start to see real change to serve what were needs of our customers that accelerated during this last few years.
Which leads me to my next question, and I'm going to shift the focus a little from the global arena to Hilton.
Yeah.
This is a question I think you get asked a lot because your prior work experience before you came into Hilton was about mergers and acquisitions.
It was.
And you have held on to not acquiring anything and have grown Hilton organically from the 9 brands, I think, when you came in.
To 20.
And I think most recently to 20
Yes,
now. It's with
20
Spark,
brands.
which has now come in
20 brands.
more recently.
We've more than doubled our brand portfolio, and we've more than doubled the size of the company.
So here's a question I want to ask you that you've not looked at acquiring, or maybe you have and haven't ended up doing so. But do you think that in the post-COVID scenario, given that there will be stress on some portfolios which may be available for acquisition, is that something that you might consider in sort of given the balance sheet side you have, the leadership position? The world just thinks that Hilton is going to acquire something. Is that true?
I don't think it's if you look at the pattern, I've been here going on 16 years and we've not bought anything. And you're right, my background is a lot of M&A. And not to mention the first 6 years of our existence, we were owned by the most acquisitive company on earth, Blackstone, and yet we still bought nothing. So listen, never say never, but I think the odds on bet would be we will not. And so the question is why? One, we look at everything. Like we have an M&A team. They're small but mighty. And we look at everything because we should, because you never know. The filtration system is actually quite simple, from my point of view. And I sort of think like in life and business, you got to be strategic, because if you try and look at everything and be all things to all people, you'll fail. Particularly when you're running really big, multi-100,000 person organizations. You can't be lurching left and right and, up and down. And so, what I've tried to do is create a really simple filtration system for how we look at these things so that we don't waste a lot of time. Look at things, but don't dwell on them. And the filtration system is one, is it accretive to our brand portfolio? Meaning, is it something that will help us with our existing customer or help us acquire new customers because it's something that is missing and that they would like. So it's accretive from a brand point of view. And the second is it accretive from a value point of view? Because I'm a fiduciary. I own a decent chunk of the company, but I'm a fiduciary. Most of it's owned by institutional investors, pension funds, and the like. And my job's to, at some level, to deliver over the long-term returns. And so, how we allocate capital matters. So is it accretive to the value of the company over the long term? And every time we look at something, it doesn't pass those filters for a bunch of reasons. One, on the brand side, we actually, I think, an unbelievable competitive advantage we have is building brands. Like, we've done 11 of them since I've been here. They're all successful. Many of them, category killer, multi-billion-dollar value brands. They will all be at some point as they sort of move their way, as they mature. And we're delivering because we do all the work to do, in a modern context, exactly what we think the customer wants, versus taking something that might have existed and by definition might be available because it's broken and trying to fix it. Why fix something when we've gotten very good at building it new from scratch and giving a customer exactly what they want? So we keep coming back to, it's better to give the customer exactly what they want. And then on the economic side, when we launch a brand, it's elbow grease, it's
Sure.
our hard work and that's, that has a cost, but not a lot. When you go out and buy brands, they're not cheap, right? So when we launch brands, it's in theory almost an infinite yield, because there's, other than our time and our brain power, there's very little invested. And so it's hard to sort of on that filter get to a place where it's not better to do it ourselves. And we have a big base. It's not like, the reality is when we look at segments that we might not be in, like Spark, those are opportunities. We have over, as you pointed out, we have 1.1, 1.2 million rooms, 7,200 hotels and 124. we got a big network already. So it's not like we have a scale issue or, our loyalty is working really, really well. So the whole ecosystem is working. So there's not a necessity to do it. And so we have, built what I think is a very strong competitive advantage in being able to build out these brands. And I think you should expect to see us do more.
And you have the world's most valuable brand.
We do.
Rated number one in Hilton for years.
Many years
for
running.
Many years running. So obviously.
And every major town in the world, they want, because of that reputation, they want to have them.
Which takes me to India, because the larger part of our audience is in India, and I'd like to ask you about India. I know, and you had a initial sort of hiccups in getting into India.
We did.
You had some fabulous joint venture partners, but for one reason or the other, things didn't turn out the way they may have intended to be. But of course, now there's, you're catching up and things are moving.
Yep.
And India is going to overtake China as the world's most populous country. Some reports say that we already have. And given the geopolitical position in which India is, and sort of the increasing role that India seems to be playing globally and the size of the market, the presence is still limited in India. So I just wanted to ask you, Chris, on how do you look at India as a part of the portfolio in your global setup?
Yeah, it is. Our presence in India is growing. We have some fabulous hotels. We have some incredibly good partners in the ownership community in India. But when I look at the population and I look at our presence, there's a mismatch. We have had some hiccups for sure. Most of the joint venture side of it predated me, but I'm well aware of them and know most of the counterparties. But I think we're on a really, our leadership there, Navjeet, hopefully he's in the audience, and his team are doing a fabulous job. And we're doing it the way we know how to do it, not unlike building new brands or our entry into, China. When I got here, we had 5 hotels in China, and other parts of the world. We're very diligent and we know how to grind, and we are in the process of really building a network effect in India, and we will keep at it until we accomplish that objective. For one simple reason: it is unbelievably important to us to be there for our network, both from the standpoint of our customers around the world that want to come to India, but also as we think about, the opportunity with 1.3 plus billion people that are moving around in India, to be able to serve them is an incredible opportunity. And those people increasingly over time, as the middle class continues to grow, are going to leave India and go to other parts of the world. If they have loyalty to our brands as we build out our network, not only will it benefit us in India for a business we have, but it'll benefit us in every other part of the world. I say it to our team all the time: we have to succeed in India. And we have had some hiccups, and it has been slower than I would like, but I think we have some really good momentum. We have some really good assets, hotels, really good partners, and we're on the move. And the Navjeet and the team are going to keep pushing and grinding, and we're going forward, not backwards.
Fabulous to hear that. And just as a additional question, and I can't help asking this, Chris, given the fact that you're looking at accelerate your growth in India, is any kind of acquisition, whether it's a small portfolio or a marquee hotel, is that on the cards at all?
Same answer that I gave you before. Everything's possible. There's not a lot for sale, and it's the types of portfolios that would really work for us are few and far between. Okay. So I think the likelihood is low, not because we wouldn't do it. Okay.
So you're saying basically, if there is something which is suitable,
we will look at it, and that would be a way to accelerate. I think just to be clear, if they're investors of mine watching, I think the likelihood's low, because I think, as you know better than I, there's just not that much that fits. One, or two, is going to become available. And so I think our plan is we're going to do it, as I say, the old-fashioned way. We're going to do it organically. We've got a good presence, and we know we have the brands and the commercial infrastructure and the team to make it happen. And if something else comes along that really makes sense and is economically rational for us, we'll consider it. But at the moment, our view is we got to keep pushing organically and grind it out.
Fabulous, which leads us to the last section of this chat, which is
Can't believe it's over.
to get to know
We're going to hit the beach.
Christopher J. Nassetta a little more as a person. And I think let's talk first.
That could be dangerous.
I'll promise I'll ask you some very straight questions.
I am who I am. Those that know me know that.
So I just want to ask you, Chris, it's a very cliched question on how does the global CEO of a portfolio of 7,000 hotels in 124 countries, you corrected me, I thought it was 123, but I'm sure this is very dynamic.
It's very dynamic. Every day we open a hotel.
This is a 24/7 industry.
Yeah.
How do you manage your work-life balance?
It's getting a little easier now because I just this year became an empty nester. So my wife and I, my wife is my childhood sweetheart, high school sweetheart. We didn't get married right away, but eventually got married. We had six.
I read about that.
We had 6 daughters together.
And yeah, that's my next question. I'm going to come to it.
No, but it's part of the answer. We had 6 daughters, and so when they were young and growing up, which was until now, because I had one that just last fall, my youngest daughter went off to college. I was, I had a lot of, responsibilities and duties as a father, but also, need and desire to want to be with them. It's a bit easier now because we're empty nested. So some of those needs have changed, but the basic answer is boundaries. Like I work hard. I like work, and my family knows I like work, and I do feel like I'm part of something bigger than me, a lot bigger than me. And the work that we do at Hilton matters, and we have impact. And that's an important part of my life. My family is always going to be the most important part of my life. And so the two have meshed together for me because they're both important parts of my purpose. Them slightly more than the business, but nonetheless, they're both important. But it's been creating, boundaries and doing things, creating habits around things that allow me to sort of remove myself from the day-to-day stresses for periods of time, recognizing I work hard, I work a lot of hours, I travel 75 or 80% of my time, mostly overseas, and I'm always on email and I'm always going. But the mechanisms as the kids were growing up were about being home on weekends, being a soccer dad, right? Being there for pizza night Friday night, taking my children to soccer games on Saturday. If I had to leave to go to India or China or wherever else, that was a Sunday afternoon after, I spent the weekend making the sacrifices on going to big events and going out with our friends so that I could, be with my children. I have things I love to do. I love to cook. So that's part of Chris Nassetta. And so there's hardly a Saturday night I don't cook for my family or a big group of friends. And that allows me to sort of remove myself from the stresses and strains. I have other things. I like being on the water. I like, I like playing golf. I'm not very good at it right now. But, there are things that I do where I just sort of create segments of time where I, force myself to focus on something that relieves stress. And that almost always revolves around my family and my closest friends. The reality is I can do this crazy job and travel all around the world because I've had that foundation for decades and decades, knowing that I can count on that. And so the only way I can count on that is continue to count on it is by making sure I make the time to invest in it. And I am present and there for them.
You've touched on almost all the next round of questions I wanted to ask you.
I'm being efficient.
But I'm still going to ask you is how do you really unwind when you need to, in terms of a vacation? Or what is it that really detoxes you? I know you said about cooking.
I think it's like time. It's really simple. Time with my family and my closest friends. Some of my closest friends have been my friends since I was 5 years, since I was a little kid. Cooking, just time with family, friends, cooking.
What's your favorite sort of meal? What do you cook?
I cook everything. I
Really?
love Indian food, by the way.
Really?
I'm not very good. My daughter has become quite skilled with Indian cuisine. She's teaching me a little bit. I've got more to do. I'm not terrible. I'm not great, but we like all cuisines. So I like to stretch myself and figure things out.
And on a lighter note, you have 7 wonderful ladies in your life at home. Has there been times when you've looked around for support as the only man standing?
I have 2 dogs and they're both male. That's my support, my male support infrastructure. No, listen, having the opportunity to live with those 7 amazing women has been extraordinary for me. If there's, I kid frequently. It's like I may be the boss at the office, but I'm not the boss at home.
Yeah, don't we all know that?
And they are really good, as they should be, at keeping me grounded and keeping me human and authentic. No matter what I do for a living, no matter what success I've had, I mean, I am who I am, and I'm a real, authentic person, and I give them most of the credit for that.
Fabulous. We're going to end this with the final question. Chris.
It's always the last one to catch
No,
you.
this is a simple question. Is there a book or a movie or a television serial that you may have read or watched recently which you really enjoyed or been inspired with, or something you want to talk about?
It's a little bit racy, but I happened to just watch it at the suggestion of a bunch of my team, White Lotus.
Okay.
There's only 2 seasons. I'm not by the way, for the record, I love to read, and I've read a bunch of books lately, and I'm not a binger. I'm not like a Netflix binger.
Right.
But a bunch of my team said, you're in the hotel business, you run this big company that's sort of like about the hotel business, and it's a tongue-in-cheek, and it's funny, and it's in some interesting places that you like, Sicily, Hawaii. And I was like, I'm intrigued by that. And so I watched it, even though I'm not a binger, and I watched those seasons, and I thought it was, if you're in the hotel business, it's a bit racy, so it may not be for everybody, but I thought it was interesting.
White Lotus it is. Chris Nassetta, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for doing this, and we're going to look forward to having you in your physical presence in subsequent editions of Hope 2023.
Great. Mandeep, thanks for having me, and to everybody there, enjoy the conference. Look forward to being with you at a future date.